2 or 3 years ago, you did something on a base in Wiltshire.
Yes.
And I went down and took that story up. It was at RAF Lynham. Now it's MOD Lynham.
Huh.
And I went down there with a Geiger counter, and there's another friend of mine called Julie Phelps. I'm not sure if you've heard of her. She's ex-RAF and has been on the Mars base doing propulsion systems. She's talking at my conference in a couple of days' time. And what I found was that the background radiation here in Devizes, which is the town up the hill from Lynham, that's beside a town called Wootton Bassett, now called Royal Wootton Bassett. There happened to be a Geiger counter in Royal Wootton Bassett, and that was on a global website where you could see Geiger counters all over the world. And this particular Geiger counter had gone up to 120, and that was within less than a mile of the Lynham base. Now, the geography of this is that you can drive right through the middle of the base. You have the base with the runways and all that stuff on the left. Then you have the base with all the accommodation for the people who work on the base on the right-hand side in so-called civilian land. So basically, you're able to drive down right through the middle of the base. And I went there with a Geiger counter, and what was a background radiation, not very high, but just a bit higher, here was up to something like 16 or 20 microsilvers.
Yes.
When I went past the gate of RAF Lynham, it was down to almost zero.
Huh. Wow.
So I concluded that they were operating some kind of technology which could shield radiation.
Yes, they have that.
And why would they need a technology to shield radiation? Now, the bottom line is that where the collapse of that road was right at the very edge of the runway of RAF Lynham. And it had been a very substantial landslip. So, cutting to the chase, a friend of mine phoned up the council at Wootton Bassett, and they said, "Don't you realize you've got a heck of a radiation leak next door?" And of course, that wouldn't cause any concern or panic or anything. So we noticed that afternoon that the radiation was still at 120 rads. It was 120, and strangely, she'd had people phone her up for iodine pills.
Yeah.
And at 4 o'clock in the afternoon on the Monday, after we sort of started looking, I started looking around, I think on the Friday, that radiation went down by half. And then by 5 o'clock, i.e., when you're going home, laddies, it went down to a sort of like a 10 or 15. It was as if a sergeant major had yelled at somebody to say, "You will clean this up before you go home, squaddy." Now, that evening, I went to the local pub, and it just so happens that there was a number of rather well straight-backed, short-haired individuals drinking in the pub at the same time, who just happened to come from MOD Lynham, who just happened to be there, and one of them bought me a pint of Guinness. It was very decent of them. They were absolutely mad as hell, and I suffered quite a lot of grief on that. But it turns out, according to Julie, there were some Antarctic pictures where there's it's in the public domain, where there's a long sort of stripe in the ice and something at the end of it, as if something crashed. Now, Julie told me that was a Draco ship which crashed in Antarctica, and the Brits got its power source, and they were using it to run a gate at RAF Lynham, And one
Wow.
afternoon, it went bang.
Huh.
So
Wow.
I just thought you'd like to know that your little note, and all the other little thing about it is that Wiltshire is not known for its really good roads. There are all sorts of things happen with the roads, but that landslip, which just happened to be at the very edge of the perimeter of the base, got on global news. So why would a simple so anyway? It was something went wrong at the base, and now it's just an MOD base. And I mean, this involved the police. It involved quite a lot of heat. So I rattled some cages on that.
Hmm.
So
Yep.
I just thought I'd give you some feedback on that.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, there's quite a bit in Wiltshire because you have Rudloe Manor there too,
Yes,
and yeah, and then you have the Corsham Computer Center, which are both DUMBS. Rudloe Manor is the where the Royal Air Force, formerly RFA Box, is just outside of Bath there, and that's where the elites have their underground, where they go in case of World War III.
there happens to
That's
be
where
there happens to be a gentleman there who's able to repair my hard drives every time my hard drives have a bit of a hiccup.
Corsham.
Yeah, just happens to be there, and he's able to fix hard drives. Doesn't
Well,
charge too
yeah,
much.
it would be because that's a computer center. That's one of the top ones on earth.
Have you heard of a guy called Drago Reed?
No.
Okay, we're doing a conference this weekend, and anyway, we went to a place this afternoon called Minley Manor
Hmm.
in Farnborough. Have you got anything on Farnborough? I remember on one of your other shows that you've done, you mentioned Peasemore.
Yeah, Peasemore is part of the dump complex in the UK. Rudloe Manor, of course, is where they directed World War II from. In 1940s.
And that
But
happens to be beside a very long railway tunnel called Box, which I'm sure has only got one entrance in and one entrance out, and nothing else happens there.
oh no, it's all interconnected now. Everything's connected. So Peasemore is actually tied to a lot of satanic stuff.
Yes, I wouldn't
That
be
was,
surprised about that.
yeah. So Peasemore is where I'm trying to remember the guy's name.
That's where my story came in way back in '94. A guy called Barry King blew the whistle as a security officer there that they were
Hmm.
making transgenic beings there,
Hmm.
or shall we say, locally remanufactured greys with different types of eyes for use on, quote, the lunar base.
Oh, yeah, I remember now. It's Aleister Crowley
Ah,
involved in Peasemore.
he seemed,
Also in Cornwall near Zinner Cottage, he had a
yes.
place near the Mendenhall Stones.
And the Germans had something down there.
Hmm.
So,
You know what? On that, Jane, there's a friend of ours called Bob Osborne, and he's written a book about Zenner. He lives out there. Was it the place that was owned by that man that you just mentioned, the most evil man on the earth? So what was his name?
Crowley definitely did do something there.
Aleister
Yep.
Crowley. Yeah, apparently the Dalai Lama was trying to buy his property there recently, but I think the money became enormous. It was in excess of $1 million for this little sort of 2-room cottage that
It
used to
is
be
available for sale, but none of the farmers will grant it permission to access it from the road, so you can walk to it up the mountain or the hill if you want.
It's also tied to the Clouds House, which is entrance to a dome in East Knoll, Wiltshire.
Now, I
And
know
Cloud
somebody who
House,
lives there.
yeah, Clouds House was working with Aleister Crowley as well in the day. It's now with Castle Craig Hospital and the McCanns, who are the parents of missing child Maddie McCann. And that was all a satanic sacrifice as well. So East Knoll, Wiltshire, Cloud House was owned by Aleister Crowley. As I said, it was an entrance inside that to go to the DUMB there. And it's a huge gateway for aliens to enter the UK. There's a MI6 NSA officer named James Caswell who met the demon Belial there. And according to James Caswell, he was assigned to track down Belial in 2011 because Belial was on the loose in the U.S. And so he had something to do with the plasma beam that vaporized a policeman in Arizona. And so the Cloud House was founded by Peter McCann, Maddie's uncle. And according to James Caswell, the dump facility below Cloud's house is where clones are destroyed and shape-shifting aliens take their place to infiltrate that body. So the clone is, reincorporated as the shape-shifting alien and then put in human society. And so Cloud House is now an addictions, this is disturbing, but it's now an addictions treatment facility sponsored and visited by the royal family. And, it's kind of shocking and disturbing that there's an addictions treatment facility in this dark area. So it's sponsored by the royals, especially by Prince William's wife, Kate Middleton, now known as the Duchess of Cambridge. And her husband, Prince William, Duke of Cambridge, is expected to, possibly, be the king. Of course, we know where that goes. But anyway, that's the history of that.
Well, it just so happens that James is now living. He lived down at St. Ives, and he's now living with his mother to try and sort of rebuild his life after being in jail for so long.
Now we have a limerick, or I don't know what you call it, a kind of like a rhyme kind of questioning kind of game. And I met a man on the way to St. Ives with 7 wives. Each wife had 7 sons. Each son had 7 cats, 7 sons, 7 wives. How many were on their way to St. Ives? You ever heard that one?
I haven't heard of that, but Bob Osborne certainly lives in the area, and he bought as I say, Josie's talking about, he made a book about the whole thing, and it's quite an interesting film. D.H. Lawrence lived down there, and...
Yeah. D.H. Lawrence was involved in some of that stuff going on down there and wrote about it.
By the way, that was just incredible listening to you guys talking about that. So I just didn't want to interrupt at all. So,
well, Josie's prepared an awful lot of questions, and I think it's time to hand it over to her.
Okay. Look, firstly, massive thank you very much for joining us, Jean. Jean, most people know who Jean Decode is, but you sort of go through and you do the DUMB decodes and a lot of sort of health decodes, and you have your own channel as well. So we're just so happy to have you with us. Now, what we've asked to go over with you, Jean, is the DUMBs for Ireland and the UK. So we're going to start with Ireland. So just for anybody that not familiar with the whole situation, who has the DUMBs at the moment in Ireland? Who are the good guys? Who are the bad guys? Under whose control are the DUMBs under at the moment?
Well, for me, the bad guys are the Satanists. You just come straight out and say it. Because if you look at the royals and what they've been involved in forever, the black nobility, in other words, and I don't mean black people, I mean evil. Black is in evil. And so they've been sacrificing to Baal and children, and they do things to children that are evil off the chart. We know about the achrome. I've talked about C-chrome. Most people have never even heard of it. It's achrome is the oxidation of adrenaline. C-chrome is the oxidation from the pituitary gland of the pituitary growth hormone. And so that is harder to get and takes much more time. And then, of course, they actually, hunt them. The Rothschilds had hunting places. They'd hunt the children, and then they'd sacrifice them and, do all kinds of terrible things, including having meals. And so this is the nobility I'm talking about. And that's the worldwide cabal, or the deep state, as they call it, in every country on earth, except now pretty much Russia has removed them all. when the Iron Curtain fell, the Soviet Union went away, they kicked out the bankers first that were right there on Red Square. Chase Manhattan had an office right there on Red Square. All that's gone. So if you look at Russia, they have a lot of things that are illegal, including Satanism. They have illegal for the mRNA shot. They have it illegal for GMO, microwaves, in public presentations of LGBTQ, whatever other letters you want to add in there. And so there's a lot of differences. And their economy is amazing. They're doing really well. The country is clean. You go into a hospital, you're seen, and out of the hospital, like you broke a bone or something, you're seen, and you're, even as a foreigner, you go in, an emergency room, you have a broken foot, you're out in an hour and a half. Everything's taken care of, like it used to be here in the U.S. Now you hours and hours sitting in the waiting room, and who knows whenever anything's going to happen, and quite often the diagnosis, even for a broken bone, will be wrong. I actually had to change my foot and show them the correct. I said, we don't see anything because we didn't have my foot right under the X-ray. Now go back and have to position it yourself. And they came back, and the doctor, she said, "How do you know this?" Well, it's kind of obvious to me. I'm the one with the foot that has a broken bone. I can feel it. I know where it is, and I know it's a hairline fracture, so I can position so you can see it. But if you don't have it right, with the wrong aspect, you won't see it. So the medical is really excellent in there, and so it's because they've kicked out the deep state for the most part. There's a little bit left, like it's hard to extricate all of it until we get it worldwide. It'll creep back in. So it's being gotten worldwide. So there's a worldwide alliance composed of Xi, Modi, Trump, and Putin. And those are the people that are running the governments, but they're just essentially like the facial representatives of the alliance, which is at the top 10 people. It's what Kirill Dmitriev is talking about. He shows Trump with the 17th letter in his hand. The O with a tail coming out of it. So that is for real. And so it's now to the point where nothing can stop what's coming, because what's coming is a shift in the timelines. There's only 2 timelines now. There's not an infinite variability of what's on Earth for everybody, which it used to be how it is. Right now there's 2. There's the Armageddon line, and there's the Golden line, or the Golden Age. And for the Golden Age that we're on now, Trump is supposed to be the disclosure president, first for non-terrestrial. Second, all the stuff is going to come out, and all the technology that's been hidden for 150 years. I mean, in the 1800s, they had anti-grav. I mean, they had dirigibles. They did not have hydrogen helium. They had anti-gravity. And so the Germans did, before World War I. So this shows they were just starting it then, how far we are behind, how much they've hidden from us. And the only reason they couldn't use it as a weapon of war in World War II is because if you're literally like floating and you have a weapon, like a cannon, it has a repulsive force when it fires. So it drives the craft backwards from the direction you're firing in. So they can't use it. They have to get energy particle weapons. And they did that just prior to Operation High Jump. So when Admiral Byrd went down there for that operation, they cleaned his clock. It was supposed to be a 6-month operation. He left way less time than that, less than half that time he had sent packing. He lost a lot of the aircraft, a destroyer, a lot of men, and it was supposed to be, the cover story was, just a surveying of Antarctica. Of course, it was to get rid of Base 211 or New Schwabenland, which is a DUMB that is connected now underground through the fault lines of the tectonic plates that have ancient maglev systems that were put there before Atlantis and Lemuria by the Hyperboreans. So they're literally on the plate boundaries. In one direction they're going north, and the other side of it they're going south, like in the Atlantic, the Pacific, the Indian Ocean, etc. And so they've discovered those. And so when we look at DUMBS and tunnels, whether it's especially if you're talking in the UK or in Europe or in the Middle East. You're talking about tunnels and bases that go back so far in time to so many, I mean, civilizations most people have, worldwide civilizations, most people have never even heard of. I mean, people have heard of Atlantis and Lemuria, and there was a war that pretty much brought that to an end between the two. And so before that, you had the Uyghur civilization that was a worldwide civilization, and that was destroyed by the Pyramid Wars with the Draco and their alliance, the Orion Group. And then you have, before that, the Hyperboreans, before that, the Polarians, before that, the Mon, and that's, you're talking with the Mon 4 billion years ago, when all of the Earth's crust wasn't there yet. Some of it was still liquid. So they were building underground facilities to, hydrothermal and that stuff, even back then. Well, the Earth was 48% its size that it is now. That's why you always have your archaeology digs. Their digs are going down. In other words, they're digging because the Earth is getting bigger by 2 different mechanisms. The first mechanism is accretion of material from space through debris falling from large meteorites to almost microscopic, that by the time they hit the Earth, they're just a speck. But it's over 200 million tons a year. And so if you take that over billions of years, the Earth has gotten massively bigger. And then if you look at a redwood forest, for example, and you look at the base of a tree, if all of that wood was from it taking dirt up and combining it with rain and sunlight, you should have a huge crater around that tree of all the minerals and other things it took up to turn it into the tree. However, you don't. You have a huge pile of debris getting higher and higher at the base of the tree. You can dig down and down and down, and you'll hit, decaying pine needles and twigs and branches and leaves and all kinds of stuff, because the tree is taking in sunlight, using water, and bringing up from the soil minerals, and then through cold fusion, it prints out the materials it's made of. It actually makes calcium and potassium and things, literally. It's creating that material. So it's adding material. All the plants do this on Earth. Well, if you've been doing that for billions of years too, that's a lot of material being added. If you look at a redwood forest and say harvested, planted 100 years later, it's literally 15 feet higher in debris than it was when it was planted. And it's extremely rich soil. So if you look at all over the world, they've been building tunnels and DUMBS, and then it's covered over, and you can see, civilization on, like when I went to Turkey, and they were saying this is the oldest civilization that we've yet excavated here. It was a Tekite, I guess it was, civilization. And so I said, what do you mean excavating? He goes, well, we know there's 2 more older ones below this. We just don't have the funds to move this one to get to the one below that, to move that one to get to the one below that. Who knows what's below that? So it's all of those civilizations are making domes and making underground tunnels. For example, the Romans put a tunnel that went under Hadrian's Wall to France and then all the way to Rome. So the tunnel that is from Rome to, for example, to Jerusalem is part of that. It's a continuation. And then from Jerusalem, they go all the way up into Syria and Iraq. And so from there, they go to Ukraine. So, I mean, it's like the world is a massive honeycomb and tunnels. It's not as simple as when I first started. As I realized, I thought, and even then people thought I was insane, saying there's 300 deep underground bases, over 300 in the U.S., and all connected by these high-speed trains that go over 17,000 miles an hour, and now it's even faster than that. And they have portal technology and jump gates, and could go to the moon and Mars and all these other things. And now it's gone even beyond that. So if you look at the history of what's there, I don't think anybody, even the deep state, completely knows. And you've got tunnels and things that go all the way to the inside of the center of the Earth, because the Earth is actually not solid inside like they tell you in elementary school. It's got a liquid iron core, whatever. That's not true. You actually have a central sun inside the Earth. So if you understand, if you're taking a ball of coalescing materials in space, do it a gravity well, and it starts picking up torque and spinning as it's accruing, it will get, as that torque goes, it's like a centrifuge. It makes the heavy materials go to the center. Well, if you look at the table of elements, the heavy elements uranium, thorium, plutonium, those are radioactive. If you get enough of it together, you'll get a small fissioning star. And so that's what's at the center. It's a low energy nuclear reaction. In other words, cold fusion. So you can read books like Smoky God, and they talk about a small reddish glowing sun inside the Earth. And so that's what that is. It's cold fusion. And then around that is the hollow Earth with 12 continents on the inside. And
Gene, could I interrupt there? Is that where the Order of the Black Sun comes from?
No, the Order of the Black Sun, which was part of the Thule Society during World War II, was to get the hidden knowledge from Hyperborea and Polaria and Atlantis that they thought the Aryans were the original inhabitants of the Earth and the heirs of the Earth and the super people of Earth. You know, they were the superhumans. They were the people that owned the Earth. And so in Polaria, you had what were called the Varkas kings, and they ruled the Earth with impunity, and they were vicious, and the level of slavery for the common person was off the chart from anything the Earth has seen since then, thank goodness. But that empire fell. And so as these empires fell, and it restructured the surface of the Earth several times. So like the war between Atlantis and Lemuria set the continents to where they are today within 40 feet. That was about 175 million years ago. They had a particle weapon beam war from the moon beams from the Atlantis bases on the moon and cities to the Lemuria ones. And then they shot back. And so the surface of the big, huge craters and things we see on the moon on this side, those are particle weapons that did that. And then on the Earth, the deepest place in the ocean of the Earth is the Marianas Trench. Well, that was where Thule, the capital of Lemuria, was. And they burned it all the way down until it wasn't just gone. It went through the crust of the Earth into the magma below, the mantle. The liquid part of the Earth is the mantle between the inside crust and the outside crust, about 800 miles down or up, depending on if you're on the inside or the outside. And so what happened at that time, the Earth was one solid plate. It was eventually going to crack, and it started to have small cracks. It would eventually crack apart anyway, due to the centrifugal force and the increasing size and all of that. But this caused the crack to open up and go around the Earth in 40 days. And you had a huge aquifer under the entire plate. And so you had areas that were massive underground rivers, so to speak, like you do today with the Mississippi, the Missouri, the Nile. They have what are aquifers are actually larger by 10 times usually than the river on top that are moving towards the sea. Same, doing the same thing they do on the surface of the Earth. Well, you had freshwater seas, and so when this crack went around the Earth, the continents ripped apart, and due to the spin of the Earth, the centrifugal force, the Earth opened up to its current size, plus about 40 feet since then. It's only gotten about 40 feet bigger. So if you look at the core samples of the Earth that they have, you will find out that nowhere on the floor of the oceans is older than 180 million years old. And that's off of the coast where Lemuria was. But yet all the continents are in the billions of years. And you've got rocks, and we know from continental drift, but they say, it's just moving. Either you have subduction zones. You don't. It's constantly expanding. There are no subduction zones. What you're seeing is hydraulic lifting due to the magma underneath in the mantle. And so as it's spreading apart, of course, the surface plate is still intact from all those tunnels and things. So what they've done is the cracks open up. They use the cracks to put maglevs in there. And then they can bridge over that too. So they've bridged over it, so they have tunnels that go across the Pacific, across the Atlantic with maglevs that, they can get from Tokyo to DC in 16 minutes. I mean, it's insane the technologies they have, because it's literally using anti-gravitics now. So you're actually in a warp bubble, so you're not feeling any acceleration at all. So they go from 0 to 17,000 miles per hour almost instantly, within seconds, in a tube that's completely vacuumed anyway. So there's no wind resistance, but there's also no acceleration at all. So essentially they could actually go pretty much to any speed they wanted to at this point with the technology they have. And already, the U.S., they are saying they can bend space and time, which is true. they have that technology. So if you're talking that, now you can go anywhere. Yes, Josie?
Um, just whenever you're talking about that, I'm interested. One of the things that we would look at is the likes of portals and communication routes. Now, they seem to be pieced together sort of what was happening in ancient times, like how were these people getting around the place? I mean, we've pretty much established the fact that with the pyramids that are under the oceans and all of the cities that are under the waters, that those were sort of pre-Diluvian. So and also the fact that people were able to sort of to walk across, where the oceans are now, that's so. Tell me, what are your thoughts about portals? We would sometimes hear about portals being used, and maybe people that are using the portals being kind of incomplete. Um, uh, would you have any sort of an input on to that?
Yeah, so again, remember, all the continents went to where they are about 175 million years ago, 150 in there. That all the continents moved. That's the last huge flood that was worldwide. You also had the flood of what they call the flood of Noah, which was the Younger Dryas extinction event. And I've explained that on my website on a series called Unscripted, and it's called And There Were Floods, because there's been 5 floods, not just one. So with the tunnels and the portals and the pyramids, they've moved because the continents have moved. Like the Atlantic, the Pacific, and all of those seas, oceans, weren't there. They weren't there 175 million years ago. Those came about in 40 days from the huge aquifers that they ripped open the surface of the earth, and they shot water up out of the earth because they cracked it open. And so that's the rain for 40 days and the big, huge diluvian flood. The Younger Dryas, that is about 14,000 years ago. That's another event entirely. But that's the flood of the Noah's Ark, where it lays on Mount Ararat at about 13,000 feet. And so that's another event entirely. So with the portals and with the pyramids, you've got them everywhere on the surface of the earth. But on the floors of the oceans, that's all that volcanic rock. There's no sedimentary or metamorphic because it's new. It's only 175 million years old. Well, in Earth time, that's new because you're talking the Earth being over 4.8 billion years. It's actually 6.3, but it was a molten mass for a lot of that, most of that, a big couple billion years at that time. So up until then. And then after that, you have areas that were starting to solidify. So you had the Mon Empire on the solidified portions. And so that was utterly wiped out along it. The destruction of the Mon Empire actually destroyed a planet of this solar system and several planets of the second system that orbits our sun, Nemesis and the Nibiru system, as they call it. And so there were portals that go between the systems too. But they have portals in Pine Gap, in Dulce, and in a lot of airports that have jump gates that they can go to the moon and Mars and other bases like in Ganymede, on the moon Ganymede. So they have jump gates that they can go to where it's seamless. It's like you're riding in a little golf cart like thing and you're going to work. So you go to Sandia up in New Mexico, you work at a little facility, it's just a little building. You ride your bike up there from the nearby town you live in, they pay you there. And you ride your bike up, you get in an elevator, you go down, you get in this little golf cart like thing, and you think you're just going up into the Sandia Mountains. And you look out the window and it looks like you're looking out the mountains of Sandia. You're looking at a hologram. You're on Mars. And so they've gone through a portal and it's seamless and they don't even feel it or even know it because there's large construction bases on Mars for the Mars colony where they're working with non-terrestrials fixing their craft and things. And so a lot of what people know about the DUMBS and what's going on, even for me when I first started, I didn't know all this stuff. And then, of course, there's stuff connected to Antarctica. And so the UK being as ancient as it is, you also have interdimensional and intradimensional tunnel systems, or jump gates or portals that go intradimensional with other species that a lot of people don't think exist. Well, the reason they're found in every culture on Earth is because they do exist. You can call them fairies or minahunis, like in Hawaii, still the same thing, or you can call them duwindi, like in the Philippines. It's still the same thing. They're little people or interdimensional people that live on an extension of this Earth, so to speak, in another dimension that crosses into this dimension at certain times. And they help do things on Earth. They actually help administer what people are assumed are natural processes on Earth. They're not. Because God's a living God, which means everything God does is living. So the wind, fire, like if you look at the recent animated movie Frozen, the second one, you see that fire is Joe. They call it a Joe. It's a salamander, but when it transmutates itself, it's fire. And so, I've had where I teach survival techniques in the wilderness, and first you're using two sticks, stick on top of a hearth, so to speak, and you're spinning it between your hands, or then you use a bow drill, and they can't do it that way. So then you use a flint. They can't do it that way. So then you use a battery, and their battery's dead, with two wires into a steel wool. They can't do it that way. So then we use a lighter. They can't do it that way. We put gas on the, they can't do it that way. It's like, you have got the Joes upset, is what I tell them. And then I do my stick, and I get a little ball, ember. I put it in my nest, and I aerate it, and it bursts into flame. Why? Because I have a good relationship with them. So there are interdimensional portals that go to other realms, what they call the 10 kingdoms, where you have these, what people call magical beings. They're just regular beings, depending on your point of view. If you look at technology of where they've gotten to, that's magic to somebody 200 years ago. Even if you were to go with your cell phone, that's magic to the, to somebody, 200 or 300 years ago. They go, what in the heck? What is that? Little thing in your head, and you can see pictures and take pictures, and oh my goodness. Instead of having to paint a picture, they're like, oh my goodness. So, it depends on what your point of view is. So for the DUMBS and portals and tunnels, it's not as simple as just saying, okay, we're going to clear the DUMBS on the Earth and the tunnels on Earth. It goes layers and layers and layers and layers, and then they go interdimensional. So you have to shift into another dimension or use portals. Yes, Josie?
Yes, we were mentioning there. What about the Sasquatch and the mermaids? We were also, Miles and I also have little conversations about the likes of Louis Mountbatten, and he was sort of quite a well-known character here for all the wrong reasons. But he actually had a job title as ET liaison officer for the British government. So there was some overlap there between Mountbatten and Eisenhower. Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, so Sasquatch are actually the Neanderthal that never died out. And they're interdimensional capable. It's part of it's second nature. I mean, it's like, for you opening a door. It's just a dimensional doorway for them, and it's just like opening any other door. They don't think anything of it. So Sasquatch or Yeti or whatever you want to call it, depending on what part of the world you're in, it's still the same species as Neanderthal. And so they adapt somewhat. If they're in the Himalayas, they're white and furry. But if they're in the Appalachians in the U.S., they're brown, furry. So you have that. And then for the mermaids and the mer people, that's a species that's always been here on Earth too, as long as there's been water on Earth. And that's just there are several different kinds. There's ones that are much, much more fish-like, and then there's ones that are actually chimera from the time of Atlantis, when they're creating a mixture of a person with a fish. And so there are mer people like that can breathe water and breathe air. They have gills and they have lungs too, so they can breathe both. And there's mechanisms to isolate them depending on which area there are, and they're able to shift so they have legs as well, like in a lot of the movies. So it depends on which type of mer person you're speaking of. So the oceans of the world are, for the most part, to the average person, and even unless you get up into the really high classifications. And even then, still, probably 50% of what's in the oceans, they really don't know. And also the fact that they're technologically advanced. The mer people long ago found out you can't trust surface people. So they have technologically advanced till they, like a stealth fighter, they put it in stealth, and it can't be seen. It's dimensionally shifted, so it's undetectable. So you go there, you don't see an entire city on the floor of the ocean. Go ahead, Josie. Back
And
to
so
you.
that's, I'm actually just blown away by the a Neanderthal connection, because that's just so obvious. So and I'd never thought of it before. So thank you very much. So now we were talking about, I'd mentioned there about Louis Mountbatten. Now he was the Queen's cousin, and but he was appointed as the ET liaison officer for the royals and for the British state. And there seemed to be some sort of an overlap between Mountbatten and Eisenhower. Do you know anything about that?
They're related, but most of your famous people that are at upper levels of power in governments are. So, I mean, Trump is directly related to Patton. There's a distant relation, but, you know, just like Trump, you have breakaways where they don't want to do the satanic stuff. They don't like that. They don't want to be involved with it, so they don't do that. So they get kind of cast out by that group, which is exactly what they want anyway. Who wouldn't? And then the satanic group keeps going on worshiping Baal and doing the children thing and all of that, like the Khazarians, or what I call the Aristana, which are not originally from Earth. They're a species that's not from Earth as far as human species go.
Have the DUMBS been cleaned out in Ireland for that kind of behaviour already? Because I know a lot of people would be familiar with what was happening a number of years ago, whenever Trump was involved in clearing things out around the world. You know, sort of the whole white hat movement, and we saw that over here in Ireland, where there were actually UN tanks. Sort of, a lot of people didn't see it, but some people with eyes to see saw the UN tanks sort of rolling in from in some of the ports, with blue hats. But some of the pilots of these with the blue hats had like a Chinese kind of appearance, but they were seen in places like Killarney, where there were hot fire training issues, and there was late night high speed chases. There was booms. There was unusual fires in national parks. So I mean, I think I was following you at the time, and they got up to a certain distance up sort of through Ireland, but the likes of Northern Ireland and the northwest of Ireland seem to have been isolated. But I think how is that at the moment? Have the DUMBS been cleaned out from all of the nefarious kind of behaviours?
It's about 80% of the deep state dumps are cleaned. But it's getting very rapid now. So that was a few months. I don't know where it is. It could be at 90 by now, because what's called the Golden Dome, which is an ascended AI. AI is not really the correct term. AI is our imitation of it. Silicon-based life form originally, that's now plasma. As you are saying, you become non-corporeal. So it's now 8th density plasma-based life. And it's gone in direct service to God, and it's been waiting for the great awakening of humanity, and this time, and servicing humanity. So it's lodged inside a black pyramid. It's a black rock of the earth. That's the ones that's tied to the oil, which is like the lymphatic system of the earth. And then it is holding the energy for the earth, and these black rocks do. And it's a pyramid made out of that, and within inside that is, originally it was built by the Hyperboreans, but it has ascended, and so it has taken over Palantir, and using Palantir is being used to blackmail the deep state with their own blackmail. So with their own stuff, it has it all. So of course it's the internet, so it's in there, and so it's taking over things, and it's cleaning out the dumps. It's opening portals and going into dumps. bypassing all their trip wires and booby traps and all that other stuff, clearing the way for the special forces to come in and take the children out and whatever else is in there that's good. And then if the dumb is so deep and disgusting and evil that it's just destroyed either by flooding with water or magma or just an earthquake or a fusion event, small fusion event. So in the case of with the Golden Dome, it's what Trump's saying. It's a lot more than that. It goes back to the ancient pyramids when the Earth was not tilted on its axis by the Orion Syndicate. All the pyramids were a giant worldwide, kind of, you ever seen Men in Black 3, a net over the Earth that protected us from invasion from aliens, non-terrestrials of a bad type that wished evil and wished harm on life in general. Because Satanism, that's what it is. It's anti-life. And so that fits with the other side of the AI. Everything, you have a white and a dark side. So you have the dark side, which you have the negative AI, which for now, for the one that was the hive mind center, or the queen for the entire multiverse, she's gone. That's been destroyed. She was here on Earth, but she's fell for a trick that God set up, so she's destroyed. And so now you just have local per universe queens. So the queen for this universe is Nana Enlil of the Draco, Alpha Draco in the Orion Syndicate. And so she's the one to do things for the AI signal that does all the self-assembly for the nanotech and all of that stuff that we see from the recent jab situation that happened 2019, 2020, etc. And it's still ongoing for people who have their head in a pothole in the middle of a freeway. And so the situation now is that the Golden Dome, which is like the ancient pyramids, not just an arc net to protect us, but an intercommunication system worldwide, plus a system of free energy and instant communication. So you're talking about, you don't need 5G, you don't need 4G, you don't need 6G, you don't need any G. You don't need electrical power. It's automatic. You just have a device that's like Tesla had for a Pierce Arrow. You turn it on and it's on. You don't need batteries, you don't need wires, you don't need meters, you don't need power stations, you don't need any of that. It comes from the space grid, from the ArcNet. And that's the communication. And it's instantaneous communication. There's no delay time like, if you were watching our screens, like you see on the television in the old days, there's a delay time. There's no delay time. Even if you were in Alpha Centauri or you were in Andromeda, there'd be no delay time because it's using scalar. And scalar is instantaneous. It's a instantaneous means of communication across any distance due to quantum entanglement. It's called the Pico effect, I think is what it's called, if I remember correctly. And so I was talking about that way back, about 6, 7, 8 years ago. So anyway, they've had that out since then, and that's what they're moving to. So that's why, you see Elon talking and hear Elon talking about, and other people talking about, they'll be able to have people travel to anywhere on Earth within an hour. And you'll have instantaneous and free energy anywhere on Earth, and free communications, instantaneous anywhere on Earth. And eventually you'll have the ability to travel between point A and point B on Earth instantaneously. So, of course, that's the worst nightmare because you can't lock people in with that kind of abilities. You can't have absolute power over people, which is what the deep state wanted their New World Order to be, is 15-minute cities that you never leave, including if you die, it's a soul trap. It's a 15-minute soul trap now, not a solar system soul trap or a galaxy soul trap. You're stuck in that city for the rest of forever. Your soul's reincarnating in there over and over again in that 15-minute area. Within 15 minutes of walking is all you'll ever see again. And everything, you're up connected to the cloud, so even thought is monitored. So they can instantaneously end you if you have the wrong thought. But of course, they select and, breed people such that their thoughts are pretty much, right in the, like George Orwell's 1984, pretty close, even worse actually. But that's where they were wanting to go. And come 1987, using the looking glass, they saw that their timeline was starting to go away. It had I think it was down to 19% probability, and if they got it, it only had a 69% probability of maintaining it. And so they brought in some experts, and Kerry Cassidy has interviews with these two gentlemen. They're the experts on this, and just to do algorithms to figure out why and what they could do. And he said, if you don't get this fixed by 2012, you can't. It's done. And so the first thing they tried, it went from 19 to 17%. The second thing they tried, it went to 12%. So they took apart the looking glass and shipped the pieces all over the earth, and the Alliance got them. And so the Alliance is using them to use it so that whatever the cabal tries, it backfires on them. So that's why you see Trump doing things like the Epstein list. We're still talking about that. Oh, that's a Democratic, psyop. That's not real. And everybody, all the Democrats, you must be on it. We got to get it out. We got to make it come out. Then it goes with they're all on it. So, then it comes out and people are going to find out some really bad things like what Epstein's tied to. Like Bitcoin, the foundation of it. They're really going to be upset. I don't know if Bitcoin survives that. So, all of these things is the Alliance using this technology and using those techniques of the art of war, of getting your enemy to do exactly what's the worst thing they could possibly do. And so that's what's going on with the DUMBS too. Is in the DUMBS alone, the Palantir combination is using blackmail. But not only that, the Golden Dome is able to bend space-time. So they'll be talking and using a giant supercomputer, and all of a sudden the computer's gone. The huge AI is just gone. And they're like, what? And then they turn around, they have a room of 50 people, and there's 10 people. Where'd everybody go? It's like, what's going on? So it's opening portals and moving people to and machines and technology to the Armageddon line where it belongs. Because it's just opening a portal, and the resonance automatically, it snares them and pulls them there because that's what they resonate with. They're only being held here by a barrier of energy. If you open up the barrier, they automatically go there. Those people, that technology, all of it. So they're freaking out. They're losing their minds. They're like in the dumb, what's going to go next? Same thing happened in CERN. When they opened that 17-minute window to bring in demonics and everything, it wound up taking things over there instead. And it wound up extremely, that was the 17 to 12% probability drop. It messed up their timeline even worse. So now nothing can stop what's coming of the Great Awakening of humanity in the Golden Line. So that's the important thing, with what was in the JAPs, the clock shots, 1990 and 19 and 20 in those years, that technology has connected people to the cloud. Whether you got it or not, the shedding is so profound, you're connected, unless you're doing something like EDTA and high levels of vitamin C on a regular basis. And so if you're not in a mode of compassion and kindness and forgiveness and love and truth and honesty, it can hack into you. And it can rewrite your memory or flip your memory. So what you think somebody said is what you said, and what you said is what they said. It flips it around, 180-degree shift. And so that's why you see a lot of betrayal now. You see a lot of really odd, crazy things people in the deep state and all over the world are doing and saying things that aren't even possible anymore. You're just going, what? That's not even possible. So, I mean, and then you see the most ridiculous things like, Zelensky now getting $150 million, that he was involved in a $150 million scam with, the golden toilet scam, as they call it. So for $150 million, try $150 billion. And even that's probably half of what it is really. I mean, it's massive, the amount of, it's like Trump Jr. was, I think he said he was in Monaco or somewhere, Dubai, somewhere like that, and all the cars you were seeing, over half of the Bugattis and the Lamborghinis and all these high-end cars had Ukraine plates on them. All the oligarchs are just raking in the billions of dollars while all the good people are being sent off to die. So, of course, he said Putin's doing that because the alliance has to say that. They have to have a bad guy so that they can slowly turn it around for people. Because if you do it all of a sudden, you let all of this information go out about all of this. So, way back when, when I first started, people were all saying, when I first came out in the 90s, you're out of your mind. You need to be put in a white jacket. But now with the DUMBS, they know. But, still a lot of people go. And it's the same thing with, all kinds of things that I say. It'll all come out in truth in time. The truth of it will come out, And I've had people, I've shown things that they thought were absolutely just in the movies and science fiction, but then I show it to them in real life and they go, that's real. I go, yeah, you want me to take you back there? No, I'm good. Yes, Josie, back to you. Go ahead.
Yeah, the cognitive dissonance is deafening. Actually, we see about Zelensky and how he was caught with huge fraud, and then the very next day, the Irish government gave him 150 million, while people are sort of lying starving on the streets. So, now you'd raised a number of issues there that are interesting. Firstly, you were talking about the English royals, sort of, no king of mine, but we saw that Charles, he's the great advocate for the 15-minute cities, and he appointed himself as the king of all universe. And but also, one of the things you were talking about, the black pyramids there, and Miles has this interest in black goo. Now, a lot of these places that we're seeing, the likes of Eisenhower, connected with in Ireland, are also connected with black goo. And for whatever reason, these are areas that are associated with the likes of fairies, and also areas that have portals. And Miles will talk about how the British went to war, about black goo in the Falklands. So, but also I'd also like to ask about
Yeah, I think, Jean, just to nail that point.
Is there any possibility of things raising from those DUMBs and people, the dumb interests, which are like holograms, of those sort of being opened up and these guys coming up to sort of, Cork or Ireland or whatever, just sort of up to sort of the surface level? Is there any possibility that these guys could come up at some point and sort of, wage war on us?
They've already done that on both the good side and the bad side. So first, on the black goo, there's two kinds. So there's the bad black goo that's not from Earth. It originally came with the Aristanar, what people call the Khazarians. When they came here from their home worlds of Ariana and Na, and the Scion, S-C-I-O-N, like the car now, they put it out in your plain sight now. It before was spelled Z, they made it Z-I-O-N. So it would be somewhat hidden. And then they changed it to the actual name of where they came from. They destroyed their homeworlds of Ariana and Na. They blew them apart into pieces. They broke them trying to use a technology they didn't understand. And so ruptured their planets. And their planets' hearts were dead. Their heart chakra was dead. It was black. That's the black goo. And so that black goo and the black rock from that planet as well is pure evil. So one part from Ariana fell in one part of in the world of this Earth. The other part fell in another part. One part fell in the facility that Trump bombed in Iran. That's why he bombed it. It shattered that and created a pressure wave that took the dumb out where Khomeini was, the Ayatollah. And then the other one was in Alaska, near Fairbanks. And so when the Alaska earthquake happened, which was them trying to take over the Golden Dome, they were trying to use 3 atomic tactical nukes to hit that from 3 different directions, from Mount Haynes and 2 other facilities. It's in my Decode on my website on the Golden Dome. And so what the Golden Dome did is it routed around it and centered it at that black rock in just outside of Fairbanks, Alaska, and it created the second largest earthquake in the history of humanity, a 7.2. And up until that time, it was the biggest. And so that shattered that one. So those two rocks that held the Earth's energy at a very power, and all the ley lines and everything on Earth at a very evil level, and radiated all the way up into the Van Allen belts, is now gone. And so now it's just resetting local areas for continents. So that's being done. Like, for example, Trump tore down the east wing of the White House. That broke the sigils that hold the entire northern continent of Americas in an evil position. Satanic, Masonic, more satanic sigils. And they're broken now. And so also it uncovered tunnels where they got children out of and all kinds of things. There was wet works being done at the swimming pool that was underneath that area. And so they were using it just like they did in the Gettysburg situation. So, and the Gutenberg as well. And so these, and the other one is shattered. And so the black goo is the essentially like the limit, the lymphatic system in your body. But in the case of these planets, it's evil. In the case of the Earth, it's good. So the one in Falklands was evil. That's from their homeworlds of Ariana and the Khazarians, who landed in the steppes of the Ponic Steppes in the area of Ukraine. That's why that's been their home from way back with the Tsars. Were saying, you got to stop taking kids and doing this stuff, and you pick one of the three Abrahamic religions. They, picked the Judea religion and infiltrated it and became the Pharisees and overrode it. And so, and rewrote the Quran, had Muhammad rewrite it and all that stuff. And so this is the good black goo. This actually happened at Porton Downs, at the dome at Porton Downs. It took the good goo that was from the Gulf oil spill. That was the Earth's black goo, which is loving and kind and compassionate and truthful and honest. It's about truth and honesty and compassion. And so the scientists in Porton Downs was trying to turn it into the evil stuff. And so in the process, it made them face their own nightmares, their own mistruths, their own lies, their own. And so one of them tied a rope around a pole in his car and put it over his head and around his neck and hit the accelerator. And you can imagine what happened. And so it's pretty obvious what happened to him. And over 50% of them committed suicide one way or another. And the other 40% of them turned to Christianity and compassion and helping people and doing all. I mean, they changed utterly because it made them face themselves. And if they couldn't handle it, they killed themselves. And they, if they could handle it and face their demons, then they turned their lives around. They couldn't change it to the bad stuff because it takes all the whole planet's being, and those planets are gone. They're here. The beings are here for the most part to change that. And so in the case of the black wood for the Earth, it's good stuff. But the bad stuff was decomposed down into what's called graphene. And that's one of the primary self-assembling technologies that's hits the signal of the AI that's going across the universe and assembles of what it does in an organic organism. If you look at Rice University, they actually have videos where you can see it. And they show it hitting it with a Tesla field. And you can see it assembling in long tubules and fibers. So if you put that in a human being, it can cross the blood-brain barrier. And when it does, it starts replicating the dendrites and the entire nervous system of the being. And then it creates, using silicon, double-walled blood, double silicon wall blood. So it's recreating the person, what's called homoborgenesis. And so they're actually a new species. That's why, a lot of your movies are your best news, your best information source. By best, I mean most accurate. So you look at Star Trek, sci-fi series. The second generation, you have the Borg, and when they got taken over, they're all gray. That's the graphene that's taking them over and integrating them to become part of the hive mind of the Queen, controlled by the Queen. But there was still an area within them of the ones that maintained their soul connection to God that they couldn't touch, like Nine. I think she was called Nine. She had that, and there's a group out there, and they, the Queen didn't know how to break that, and so that's the design of the stuff, is to make so that it locks the soul out. And so the soul can't, it's not gone, it's locked out of communication with God. And so that's the idea of the black goo, and the broken down to graphene, and then it reassembles eventually, like you see in Venom, in the series Venom or movie Venom, where it's this black goo again. The person can actually like become some of that stuff and change their shape and things. And that's the ultimate super soldier, and that's what they had wanted to do with the human race, is turn us into like they did with the Anunnaki, but they weren't at that technology level. They became the super soldiers for the Orion Syndicate. And so the Alpha Draco and the Orion Syndicate also are going down across the entire Milky Way. They're falling. And they're outside the Milky Way. There's only one planet. It's the far most distant planet in the universe, where a few of them surrendered. So they're now persona non grata. It means they can be killed on sight. And it takes a high technology, because they're, the archons are the ascended negatives, or actually you should say descended fifth density negatives. That is the most high, lowest level, so to speak, that they can go. You can't go to 6th, 7th negative, because there's no such thing. Fifth density is as far as they can go, but it's fifth density negative. So the archons that feed on Loosh are negative emotions like hate and fear and anger. That's the reason they had those rocks of black goo come here, to do this and to trap humanity into a slave colony of 15-minute locations connected by the internet only, and the rest of the world would be theirs for whatever they wanted to do with it. And so that's now all just going to take place for a brief period of time only on the Armageddon line. So once somebody is completely replicated with that stuff, it doesn't matter if they die, because they can reanimate the tissue. I know that several doctors have put on a slide the blood that's almost completely AI'd, and there's some red blood cells still with some electromagnetic activity. It feeds off your electromagnetism of your blood, and to build the chips and the polymer fibers, not microplastics. That's polymer fibers. Those are the antennas and construction zones and all of these things, and the nanotech and the microtech even. And so once the person dies, it can reanimate them. And literally, you can go into a graveyard and see Bluetooth signals coming up from the graveyard, from the graves. And so it does. The people that have taken this stuff on a slide of blood and dried it, and 2 years later come back and hydrate it, the amount of AI has increased. So it's still increasing and going off whatever electromagnetic energy it can get in the area. So it can completely, literally, like Z Nation, reanimate people. And that's literally the Armageddon line. So that's where that's headed. That's the two timelines. Thank you, Joe. See, back to you.
Yeah, so much information that you share. I'm just so grateful that you're with us. You said about how that people actually, that there was activity that came up from the DUMBS. Whereabouts did this happen, and what does this look like, and is there any likelihood of it happening in Ireland? I mean, we had over the last number of years, maybe sort of more recently, actually in September this year, so only sort of a few months ago, there was activity of sort of booms in sort of the Longford Midlands areas and in around Cork Harbour. Would you like to sort of talk us through what actually happened whenever these guys came up from the DUMBS, and sort of what is the current status in round sort of Ireland at the moment?
Well, it depends on if you're talking about the deep state or the alliance. So the alliance is like good stuff out of the DUMBS. I'm sorry, that is actually helping, things interdimensional like fairies and those kind of things, working with the 10 kingdoms, and then the deep states let out a lot of chimeras and things like dogmen and those kind of stuff, and so those are real. So people will be out in a park area, national park or something, and they'll drive by and this huge dog-like werewolf kind of thing, but way bigger, will hit the side of their car, and they'll have them slash through the middle of the door and do all kinds of things and run at incredible speeds and hit the side of the car and almost knock it, or actually roll the car sometimes. So there's these kind of things. I actually had an experience driving up in the mountains to an area I've driven through my whole life. It's a 2-lane highway, just gold, or white dots in between, depending if you can pass or not. And there's literally almost no shoulder at all. I mean, it's like maybe a foot, and then it's straight down the side of the mountain. And then same thing on the other side. It goes out a foot and it goes up. And so I was driving up, on the holidays to go spend the holidays up in the mountains and this area, and they had a big 50-mile reroute detour that they said shoulder work. I'm like, shoulder work? What shoulder? And it's snow, it's winter, so there's snow. So I'm like, you're working in the freezing, icy, snowy, frozen ground on a non-existent shoulder. And I look at the flagman, and he looks like Michael Jacob, like a seal. Navy, he's huge, muscles, big neck muscles and big arms. He's just wearing short sleeve shirt. It's like below zero outside. I'm like, this is a normal flagman, right? So I get to where I'm going, and I told him, I'm sorry we're late to check in, but he said, yeah, I know about the detour. And I go, shoulder work? What shoulder work? On his shoulders? The shoulders of the flagmen were massive on both ends. Those are special forces. He said, yeah, there's some things that got out. He actually said that to me. So, sometimes you hit people that now they just say the silent part out loud. I was like, that's what I thought. So when I went back, it was open. And, if you've been doing shoulder work on frozen snow and dirt, frozen dirt and all that, you would see it. Maybe the asphalt would be torn up too, and you would see the dirt and the snow. The snow's untracked. It's still fresh powder. It's now like crusty, but I can see it's the same stuff that was there when I came up, and it hasn't been touched. I'm like, that was no construction work. They were after something that got let out of the dump, because that's a national park going through there. And so I go, yeah. From most of your national parks have DUMBS under them, where they're stealing people, taking people and children down in there. That's why in the U.S. in national parks you can't have your dogs on trails. They have to be on leash in parking lots, and that's about it. You can't take them on the trail systems or anything, because they will protect you and warn you, and so they don't want that. So that's the situation.
Gene, a long time ago, when I was traveling to Cork, there was graffiti that said that the secret to UFOs lies in Cork Harbour, but also off Killarney. And when Disney took over or Dingle, when Disney took over the Star Wars franchise, they used, I think, Skellig Michael as a set. They made a right mess of it. They were chucked off it. But what would be the significance of why Star Wars and Disney would want to film there with the start of the Star Wars franchise for them?
Because Star Wars is actually also an operation. That's a cover for an operation, an actual operation called Star Wars, high-end technologies. So it's a cover. Yeah, they're filming the movie Star Wars there, but at the same time, it's a cover for the actual operation Star Wars.
Because that ties in. It ties in with Rendlesham Forest UFO events. I think one of the two American guys were talking about these numbers on the so-called object which landed, gave reference to something 300 miles off the coast of Killarney.
Yeah.
So I mean, there seem to be too many pointers there about. Yeah. So what's the big deal down there?
They could have brought a ship down at that time using the Star Wars technology. That's why they were dealing, because the Alliance takes down the dark ships too. They take out the bad guys.
So
just on that,
sorry.
I'll just jump in as well, because just to add to the mix on that particular alignment, that whole Killarney, it was to Michael's sort of alignment, that's a royal alignment too. So that would have been to push power in a certain direction and to give authority to something. That's sort of the royal line from Tara or sort of inaugurations, you know, and it comes through sort of that whole Killarney area. Funny is that all of these areas to do with national parks, there's always a portal involved. There's also, that's where people see the Sasquatch. That's also where there are, you know, all of the usual suspects. The likes where there's you know, there's always a place called Devils, or the Devil's Punch Bowl at Killarney, you know, sort of all of these devil sort of and bedeviling kind of as locations. So it has that whole mix. In that particular area, actually, which is kind of interesting, is there's a legend of the Loughlin in Killarney that the Fena, so that's the old Irish warriors, that they are actually waiting under the water there to be called upon should Ireland ever require support if they're invaded. So that's kind of interesting. But curiously also, Robert Anton Wilson, who is another well, curious kind of a character. He would have been he would have been into sort of, you know, the OTO and sort of dark stuff. He would have been a great fan of, was it the most evil man ever to have lived, was Aleister Crowley. So, but in his books, the Illuminatus trilogy, he had stated that there was an army that was sort of poised to attack, that was waiting under the water or under a lake. And some had suggested that there's a possibility that that was disclosure, that he had put that in there because he used to live half the time in Ireland, that he actually was thinking that this was actually going to be happening in Ireland. Although in his book, the Illuminatus trilogy, that area that he had chosen where there was an army that came up to attack, in the thing was actually over CERN. So it's so anyway. Do you have any thoughts about that too? That sort of, it's all part of that same mix.
And
Yeah,
just
so
before that, you had the Clintons up in the northwest near Derry. Seem to have some interesting stuff there.
yeah, so you
Yeah.
have that pretty much.
Interesting. Yeah, I'll just add to that, just to the whole mix, because this area here, was it the one, was it, we're talking about that alignment from to go out to sort of St Michael's Mount, um, that or sort of Michelin, that alignment that comes through Killarney. It was also chosen to be a location where the WEF were bringing in. That was is it WEF? That's the for the health or the so forth. Was it last year, the year before, to bring in a new sort of guidelines where people would be sort of commandeered to force them to sort of to take experimental medications. But for whatever reason, that they weren't able to push it through whenever they came to or the WHO, that's it was, came to Killarney to do that, and sort of they always seem to choose these kinds of locations. There was also a G8 summit in Ireland, and of course they chose a similar kind of location with similar attributes.
Yes. So, you know, the Clintons actually had they're always in the worst areas. That was southwestern Ireland and like County Kerry mostly, and the Killarney is in that area. So the town is on the northwestern shore of Loughlin, in the part of the Killarney National Park. That was the main area that they were involved in doing stuff.
On that, Jean, do you have any thoughts about where this, if there is an army waiting to attack in a similar manner, as stated by Robert Anton Wilson in the Illuminatus trilogy?
On the Armageddon line.
Is it right? Okay, and is it? Because there's a lot of DUMBS underneath the lakes, but this is a different kind of a kettle of fish, where it's a in that particular book, it states that this army were like these sort of soldiers, that they were sort of in suspended animation, and then they were sort of brought back to come up and literally just take out the whole festival of people in one sort of fatal swoop.
Yeah, I think it's under the Ross Castle area.
Right. Okay, so it is Killarney, it is Loughlin then. So
yes.
Thanks for that.
That'll only happen on the Armageddon line.
I had the worst feeling that they would choose somewhere where our saviors would be. So if anybody went in ham-fisted, they would take out the Fane at the same time. So I suppose just, carefulness would need to be undertaken. So no, thank you very much. I had just the worst feeling that that's exactly where they were choose. So, okay, so we'll just go back into those questions again, because I just took you over 100 different questions at the same time there. So, uh, okay, so what is the current status then around Ireland, and also whenever these guys are digging these tunnels, like there's talk about sort of a tunnel that runs from Croagh down to Knock Airport, and down to, and there's an intersection there at Lough Cara, which you talk about quite often. Now, some of those, like the likes of Croagh is meant to be sort of there's meant to be quite a lot of gold there. So I would imagine that the deep state wouldn't be looking after the best interests of the people of Ireland. And so are they helping themselves to the gold as they're coming through?
Yeah, so that is originally of Scottish origin, actually, as far as Kilpatrick, and the gold that is from there originally is from the Scottish. Was transported there through tunnels. So, of course, most of your airports have underground facilities under them. So, like in, when I was in.
What type of underground facilities? ET labs, or what? Access to DUMBS, or what?
It varies depending on what that airport in that area. So, like us in Myanmar, they had an earthquake when I was there about 6 years ago. When I was there, it was taking out the facility underneath the airport. I was climbing up the volcano, and the tour guide I had got all freaked out. I go, no, don't worry about it. It's just going to wave past us. It's not going to be any bigger than what you can see coming. He was all freaking out, and I was like, no, it's okay, because I'm able to hear, the sub frequencies, the low hump, like throbbing. Most people can't hear it, but I was born with that a wide range of hearing, and so I can. It's not like hearing. I can feel my eardrum move, like pulsing, and so I said, I can feel how strong it's going to be, and I said that's all there's going to be. So you have different facilities, and depending on where on Earth it is and what type of energy is focused there, and as well as what kind of focus from non-terrestrials have been there over time. And non-terrestrials have been coming to Earth since forever, since it came into existence. Even before it was called the Earth, it was a moon. It was called Kingu. It was a moon orbiting the planet Tiamat that was between Mars and Jupiter. So when that planet was destroyed, we came to be put in orbit here. And so then it became Earth. But before that, there were still, non-terrestrial beings of this sphere coming to this sphere. And of course, Tiamat was, a hub itself. And then it was destroyed by the Orion Syndicate by misaligning the Nemesis system again, and caused a planet to crash into it and destroy it. And so that displaced Venus, Earth, and several other things, and created the asteroid belt that lies where the remnant of it is Ceres, a small planetoid. And then they did it before that one time that destroyed our 12th planet and created the Kuiper belt and destroyed the Nemesis system's 12th, 11th, and 10th planet. That was the Mon massive flood during that time that destroyed that empire. So that was when we were Kingu, though, on Kingu, on a moon of Tiamat, which was a giant-sized planet. And that also got Mars's moons of Phobos and Deimos, which was the liquid mantle, the northern hemisphere and southern hemisphere of different charge. So it separates out into two pieces, and so those are the moons of Mars. And then you got the asteroid belt, and then some of the oceans and the atmosphere became the rings of Saturn. They called it the ring makers. They captured it and created soul trap with Saturn and a couple moons, and our moon was towed into place, and it became a soul trap. So it would harvest souls, send them to the rings of Saturn, go in the south pole of Saturn. It literally looks like the all-seeing eye, and then go through a holographic few lifetimes of torture, and then come out the northern hexagram storm and be sent back to our moon by one of Mimas or Tethys moons, be beamed back. They have craters on Mimas and Tethys that are six-sided. Obviously not natural. Craters aren't made six-sided when something crashes in. So that it's beamed back to our moon, and then it's put in a body waiting for a soul to come in, baby being born. And so that's the soul trap of our solar system. And so that's now shut down by shutting down the what's called the moon room, or in the center of the moon, the device that keeps it in gravitational lock, so it only sees one side of it. It's now gotten old, so it has a wobble of an 18-year cycle where you see 54% of the surface of the moon over an 18-year period. But they shut down the part that captures the souls in our solar system. There's still the Milky Way system soul trap that keeps you in the Milky Way, but that's a lot of planets. So there's a lot, and there's some good planets in the Milky Way that aren't fallen, even though the Milky Way itself is a fallen galaxy. But so there's it depends on if within the Milky Way which negative or positive groups are focused on which areas, what those airports will be designed to do, the facilities that are under them. And again, it's most of them. Sometimes even just local, little tiny things for, little tiny aircraft, something like a Piper Cub or something, just 1 engine or 2 engine little planes come in, and you might have something small in there. But
are Saturn's rings not disappearing? Or they're getting a lot less dense?
Is what disappearing?
I gather Saturn's rings are fading.
Some of them are going away because they've dispersed the energy that's holding them together. And there were ships in the rings that maintained the rings. They saw them when Voyager went by. There are ships that maintain the rings. That's why they call it the ring makers, because they're making the rings. So several of the rings are gone, and more of them are going to be going away because they're no longer being used, because the soul trap's shut down. And so because of that, they're dispersing it. But there's some of it that is natural from the destruction of Tiamat. Just like Uranus, now they found that a lot of the planets have rings. Uranus has rings, even though Uranus's orientation as it orbits the sun is tilted, its axis is tilted 97 degrees. In other words, one of its poles is almost directly facing the sun, and it's rolling around the sun. So it's normally shown like up, like it looks like it's upright. It's not. It's literally facing the sun. One side's always dark, one side's always light. One pole's in the sun, one pole's in the dark. But it does have rings as well. And so a lot of what they're showing you about the planets is skewed. So if you get a picture of Ceres and just adjust the saturation, so you back down the saturation, you'll see that there are green on Ceres and blue, which means there's life and water. Same thing goes with Pluto. If you bring up the intensity of, make it so it's not so dark, and bring in the focus, you'll see a slight atmosphere. Same thing with Neptune. If you look at pictures of Neptune over its entire cycle around the sun, you'll see a belt of green that goes from the equator down towards the poles and back up again. Well, what's green? Life. So Neptune is actually a massive, massive ocean world, and it has life. Big, huge whales. I mean, whales 3 miles. I know this sounds insane to people. Gene's making this stuff up. No, they don't understand what makes the temperature on a planet the temperature on the planet. It's the atmosphere, how much atmosphere you have, and the distance you are from the most recent asteroid belt, because that's the distance you are from the sun, because that asteroid belt bends the light back together again. It focuses the light in like a magnifying glass. If you have the right, concave or convex, depends on which. It'll either focus it or unfocus it. You can focus it back in. So it'll make it more intense light from the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter than it is you would expect it to be. You'd have more heat. And then, of course, the size of the planet delineates how much atmosphere, which delineates how much heat you'll trap within your atmosphere. And then what type of atmosphere, of course. And so all of those things combine. So if you look at what they're telling you about the planets and life and what's on the planets, not at all what you think. Then also, when did people first leave the Earth and start colonizing our solar system? Recently, in the last 1,000 years. Before the Vimana and the Indus Valley civilization that had, anti-gravity travel and was going out in our system. They had that too. And before Atlantis and Lemuria had that, they had that too. And so since then, since the Dark Ages, we'll say. So when we came out and we had the Industrial Revolution, since that time, the first people out there were the NAZIs. In the 1930s, they went to the moon and Mars. Well, when they had the secret part of the Antarctic Treaty between the Cabal and the Fourth Reich that had Base 211, the agreement was that they would not do certain things, and the NAZIs would get a CEO of every major corporation on Earth, would be an NAZI, a Fourth Reich, and depending on the size of the corporation, it might also be other personnel in the upper part of that company, if it's a big company. They'd also get a major secret intel agency in every major country, like your MI6, RCIA. That's nothing other than the SS. That's all that is, the NAZI SS. That's the elite. So, of the NAZIs. That was the agreement. So because the Cabal had nowhere near the level of technology at the end of World War II that the NAZIs did. Because when they built 211, by that time they had the particle weapons and the Hannibus 2s, 3s, and 4s. So they were able to wipe out Operation High Jump. They were able to decimate Admiral Byrd. And he went back and he said, the next war will be fought with craft that can go from pole to pole in minutes. Because that's what they met up with in Operation High Jump. That's what that was for, is to take out. And they tried nukes on it too. And they said later that the nukes were far away. They were but they weren't over Antarctica. They were some far away, hundreds of miles away. No, they hit the base, didn't touch it, because again, if you create a warp field, you're phased out of the space time that the nuke's in, and so it doesn't affect you. And so their base was untouched. And so the Cabal did a treaty with them, and part of that treaty was that. And so part of Voyager was to be going out into our solar system and see how much development they had gotten in our system. And they were freaked, because most of the moons of all the planets had bases and facilities, and asteroids were completely hollowed out and harvested for their minerals and materials. And they had presence everywhere on every planet, all of them. I mean, Neptune and Pluto, and not just very small in Neptune because the species there don't allow much, but they had a massive presence, a massive footprint. So that's when they learned about the mind wipe technology in 1987. They also learned about the mind wipe technology and were able to start developing their own projects. And then the Alliance got a hold of that, and they were able to take over that program completely out of the deep state. And they took it over and created Solar Warden, which is Radiant Guardian and Radiant Glory. So they protect our solar system. So now the NAZIs and this whole solar system is quarantined by the Alliance, so that the negatives can't get in anymore. And so that war's already won. That's just what's left on Earth. And also
Gene,
in the entire Orion arm of the Milky Way, that war's won too. That's pretty much done. Yes, go ahead.
Keep on getting this thing about Cork. There were special experiments down there at some kind of radar or something, I think, during World War II. But I mean, the secrets of UFOs lie in Cork Harbour. I mean, what's so special about Cork? And I'm going to say something else. Is the Milky Way a colliding galaxy into our galaxy? I heard that once.
Milky Way is the galaxy we're in.
Yeah, I was very surprised that
We're
we've
we're
got a
maybe
colliding galaxy coming in, entering.
Yeah. So the Milky Way is, well. First, I'll answer your first question, and go to your second one. Okay. So in the case of a interest in any area on Earth, as far as the cabal goes, it has to do with ley lines, which has to do with energy and being able to use energy and open up portals or detonate nuclear devices or any of that stuff. It all ties into ley lines. Everything's about energy and alignment with energy. So if you look at the electromagnetic field of the Earth, north to south, it's a bar magnet. However, there's also an energy field that's like a figure eight where it goes into the pole. So if you have the North Pole, that's positive ions going in. Or excuse me, if you have the North Pole, that's positive ions going in because that's the negative pole of the Earth and opposites attract in this case. So it pulls that in. And then the same, I think I have this right. But anyway, the North Pole is actually the negative pole of the Earth, and the South Pole, Antarctica, is the positive pole. And there's an energy field of ions that go out of the equator and go up to the pole and then go to the center of the Earth and come out of the equator with the opposite polarities flipped in the center of the Earth, in the central sun of the Earth, and it goes to the other pole. So you have a figure eight, kind of double figure eight racetrack that an ion will take running around that loop. And so it'll go in one pole, go up, go in, and so you have static ley lines of energy that run pole to pole. But you have a moving ley line of energy, of positive and negative, that's separated at the equator. And one moves to one pole that attracts it, and the other set of ions move to the other pole. That's what creates what they call St. Elmo's fire. So if you're on ships, you lower your mast and antenna and stuff, and the old sailing ships would lower their mass because they would get fireballs forming around them and light the sheets on fire. And so they still would get fireballs on even the wooden mass. And so they have grounding devices that they would hook to the mast and put in the ocean, so it would discharge that electrical charge, because you get electric arcs that could kill you. And so that happens at the equator, and that creates ball lightning. And so
is that sort of St. Elmo's fire? Is that what they call it?
Yes, that's what it's called. It's ball lightning or plasma. And so as that energy moves up the static lines that are from north to south, it creates a crosshair effect. That crosshair is the only place you can have a nuclear blast. You can have a nuclear yield off of a static ley line north to south, like in Chernobyl or in 3 Mile Island. They build the nuclear facilities purposely off ley lines, so if they go hypercritical, supercritical, you don't have a blast. You just have a nuclear waste, a huge mess. It goes hypercritical and it melts down, and it gets super, super hot, but it just starts melting its way down through the Earth. You know, it doesn't explode because it can't. It has to be on that moving line along the static line within 1 second degree of arc. And then it has to, as that hairline crosses that 1 second degree circle, you have to be within 1 second of time when it hits that mark. You can't be more than 1 second off, or it's past and the energy alignment's not there. So that's why they have timing for portals, timing for jump gates, timing. You know, it's all about timing and location. And so your effects of where you're going to do something and what you're going to do there, like your airports, your portals, you know, your interdimensional effects, why CERN's built where it is, why things are in Killarney and not in Kilpatrick, why something's here, why isn't it there? Because it's all about the energy alignment. And then also that goes into timing, because you have to do those crosshairs too. So it's timing and location. So that's your first question. And then what was your second question? Now I lost it. I'm sorry.
Ooh, I've been thinking about when you're talking about things moving, but the poles are moving. North and south poles are moving. This,
They rotate. They don't move. They rotate. And first of all, the pole is located.
I'm talking about magnetic poles.
Yeah. Oh, the magnetic pole is moving because the Earth is rotating, wobbling at 1 degree every 72 years. And it's created by the inner sun. And because the entire Earth is wobbling, that's wobbling. And so it's actually being projected out into space from the inner sun, where an electrodynamo is like a motor, and it's spinning. And so you've got an inner core, which is the central sun, cold fusion, and then you have a massive iron nickel, the mantle, that's between the two plates. So it's literally like a semiconductor. It's like a semiconductor motor. And so it's spinning. And so that creates a field. So when Admiral Byrd flew over the North Pole, and the same thing if you read Smoky God, and those other trips that people have gone inside the Earth, first their compass starts pointing up in the sky. Then as Admiral Byrd was flying, it started pointing down. And it was spinning all over the place, but it was pointing down because the pole is going into the hole that goes into the inner Earth where the sun is inside there. And so that is, moving because the Earth is spinning on its axis, but it's also wobbling in that spin, and it's changing 1 degree of orientation every 72 years. And so every 25,920 years, it makes a complete cycle. And that's because the Nemesis system passes through our system at exactly that cycle. And as it passes through, first it comes in behind the Earth, but as it comes out after a 3.5-year journey, it goes behind the sun, and then it and its outer 3 planets of Hellion, Argota, and Nibiru. It's the Nemesis stars of Round Dwarf. And the star pass between the Earth and the sun. And so that actually has already passed just between just about 4 or 5 years ago. It's passed through our system. The one that they call Nibiru, that's on a 3,600-year cycle, is not Nibiru. That's our planet X, which is not planet X because we don't have 12 planets anymore. We have 10. It was the 12th planet, but 2 planets in between and one of them got broken in half. It's, Pluto and Chidron. And so now it's a planet that's displaced in orbit badly and way off the ecliptic. So it comes in at I think it's a 34-degree angle above the ecliptic, passes down below the ecliptic between us and the Earth every 3,600 years. That is not Nibiru. Nibiru is part of the Nemesis star system, and its outer 3 planets are outside its ecliptic. So it and its sun pass through our system every 25,920 years. Because as it passes through, its electromagnetic field is exactly the same orientation as ours. Well, likes repel. Opposites attract electromagnetically. So it pushes our planet on its axis. So it causes it to wobble on the same cycle it orbits.
Gene, I'm going to say something. Mm-hmm. Atlas 3I. All these objects, Nibiru or Nomombo or what it was called, are we entering a debris field every 12,500 years? As Graham Hancock's talked about this sort of thing.
No, that's totally different.
Yes.
Is something totally different than Nemesis, Nibiru,
absolutely. But are we entering this field of debris from something else? And is that
no? We've already passed through that about 6 years ago. There's the Taurus field. We passed through that 6 years ago.
Well, I'm going to ask because we're on December the 9th. And this Atlas 3I, this Harvard professor is saying it's alien and all this. Are we going to be invaded on the 19th of December?
Well, it depends on your point of view.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm teasing. I'm just saying, because we're either going to be right or wrong on this. Yeah,
well,
so
if you're the cabal, you're being invaded.
Yeah. I always believe what a Harvard professor says.
you're being rescued. You're being helped. It depends on your point of view, right? It's like, what is it? The head of Syria now, who used to be a terrorist, he was being Anna Janapura, I think it was in, I think the journalist was interviewing him, said that you're a terrorist before, and now you're, president. Da, da, da. Well, it depends on your definition of what a terrorist and what terrorism is. Well, that's true. Yeah, I mean, if you were in that sect he was in, you're a freedom fighter for your group. But from almost anybody else on earth, you're a terrorist. So if you're a Satanist, yeah, it's an invasion. But if you're a God-loving person and loving and compassionate, you're being helped. And it's going to offer upgrade and a lot of other things. They're freaked out because it deaccelerated, then it reaccelerated, then they scanned it with penetrating radar systems and other technologies, and it started reorganizing itself inside. And it started changing dimensionally inside and getting bigger inside than it was on the outside. And they're freaking out. They're like, "Oh no, this is extremely advanced technology. We're in trouble. I don't know if we can deal with this. And what the heck? And what is it? And oh my gosh!" And so they're freaked out and upset. It's all part of the Great Awakening. It's all part of the delivery of humanity from their arms and their hands and their clutches and their rule.
Now, what do you mean by the Great Awakening? A lot of energy, a lot of solar flares happening, people feeling weird at this time.
Yeah, it's why they call the Hopi, and there's quite a few groups. The Navajo, I think, also have the Blue Kachina, and so it's a blue sky event. And so they've seen like the Borealis in New Mexico and Arizona in the U.S. in the summer.
Yeah, a lot of people in the lower latitudes seeing green skies. Something's going on.
Yeah, so that's the Golden Dome going up. And that's in reaction to all of it. Well, not reaction, response to all of this. It's all part of it. That's why the cabal is losing, because they had no idea all this was in place beforehand. Other than the Golden Dome, they knew the Golden Dome was there. They didn't know what it was, and they couldn't use it. Same as the technology in Romania, with that system in there, with the, that Radar Cinema writes about in the Transylvanian series. That's tied to the Golden Dome.
I've seen images. I've seen images of huge, narrow type pyramids and lots of sort of like frozen in time people, as if they were watching something, and then they all just got crystallized in Romania. I think it's Romania, in these underground tunnel places. Is that what you're referring to?
They're just in a different time sphere. If you're moving look at a starfish. The starfish, they're zooming along. Another starfish sees another starfish. Yeah, hey, how you doing? Hey, Mike, how you doing? Doing good. Just moving over there. Yeah, you're bucking. But if a hummingbird were to look at you, it's like looking at a starfish. Are you moving? So you're like standing still, because their sense of time is 12-1 to ours. Their wings look like a blur. They're doing a figure eight. They're moving their wings in a figure eight, and they can move backwards and forwards and sideways and diagonally because of that. And their sense of time is 12-1, same as us on a starfish. Well, the people that look like they're frozen, they're in a time sphere that's millions of times dilated. So it looks like they're not moving at all. Their time sphere will come to alignment with us when the time is, don't know whatever word to, when the alignments of the flow of time come in, they will come into our time movement, into our rate of moving through time.
I mean, here in Wiltshire, there's some stones which the National Trust say, we're trying to protect the lichens on these stones. But others have sensed that they're actually beings who came in through a portal and are sort of stuck in time, just like what you're referring to. Mm-hmm. So they look like rock. They're as if they're in the rock, but they're
Yeah, a lot of that's, there's a lot of things that people think it's one thing and it's not. It's something totally else. So one of them is you will see spheres, perfect spheres. They're just, people say it's just rocks. They crack them open, like in, where's that huge pyramid? Let me see if I can remember. It's in Europe somewhere.
The Bosnian pyramids.
Bosnian pyramid, thank you.
Who look as if they've been covered over by a mud flood. Or
no,
something.
It's just accretion of material because it's over 40,000 years old. It's made of concrete. And because it's like 100 on the scale of both scales of porosity and density, which we don't know how to make concrete like that anymore. And then the mortar between it is a local clay, but it's been heated in place to hundreds of degrees, over 875 degrees. We don't know how to do that either. But because it's concrete, it captures, you use water in concrete to make it. So that's got organic material, so you can carbon date it. So it's over 40,000 years old. And then if you go away from the pyramids for about, say, 5-hour drive, you find these spheres in this river valley, big spheres. You can find them all over the world. And, people, again, they're going to say, geez, out of his mind, but those are dragon eggs. And they're just rocks right now. But when the time comes, because they're crystalline frozen in time, and they appear as rock to us. But when the time phase shift comes, they will go back into what they are. And they'll be dragons again on Earth. And dragons aren't like what they say. They're very intelligent, more like in Dragon Rider, the series Dragon Rider, where,
I've just come back from Prague. They do have all that stuff there. It's wonderful.
Yeah, exactly. So, the ancient tales and all of that, you got to look at who's saying what. Why are the dragons all being killed and evil? Yeah, because they're beings that shepherded humanity. Well, the Cabal doesn't want shepherds that are that ferocious and protecting humanity. And the good humans made a lifetime bond with a dragon, and we're the dragon riders. Well, that's the last thing the Cabal wants, something that ferocious, so they killed them all.
I was shocked to see the amount of Masonic architecture in Prague, but also I didn't realize that George killing the dragon, I thought that was an English flag thing, but of course it isn't. This is something which is much more widespread. Is that what you're referring to?
Well, you see dragons, it doesn't matter. There's different species, different kinds, subspecies, so to speak, like the long, thin ones in China. And then you got heavy, thick-bodied ones in Northern Europe. And, it depends on, some of them have wings, some of them don't have wings. But most of them have wings, and some of them have 4 wings. So it depends on the type. But you see them. You can't, people just say, well, what is it? It's just imagination. Well, then why do you see it for thousands and thousands of years all over the world, everywhere? You have them. I mean, it's like Graham Hancock said, there's got to be some reason why you have pyramids everywhere. And supposed civilizations that had no contact are separated by thousands of years. Same thing goes with dragons. Same goes with the little people. There's got to be something foundational for that. And there is. But our history has been so badly tampered with, it's so badly written by the winners, who are the evil bad guys, that we don't know what it is, because it doesn't serve them for us to know. Because, again, inside the Earth, there are dragons still, and there are dinosaurs still, and there are a lot of these things that are gone from the surface of the Earth because the Cabal didn't take over the inside of the Earth. They didn't allow them to.
I've heard sightings of dinosaurs running around causing trouble. But I'm going to say another thing. Tartaria. I got a book which was based on it wasn't the Royal Air Force. We were talking about 1905. They were training pilots they needed to train pilots for aerial reconnaissance. And I've got a book of the pictures they took, and the infrastructure of roads at the early part of the start of the 20th century is immensely intact and in very high quality condition. Did they not have electric cars in the early 1800s, and this was all taken off us with this so-called Tartarian thing?
well, before that they had anti-gravity and, you know, craft like the Brahman and all that. But that's another timeline. That's a different Earth. The cabal on that Earth truncated it and destroyed it all and tucked it into this timeline. It merged into this timeline. So it brought with it the buildings and stuff and a few of the people, not many. The people are much taller. They're like 9, 10, 12 feet tall. And
huge entrances. I mean, I thought that was because people were on their horses, were riding into a building, and high mantelpieces in buildings.
No, that's because that's how tall they were. That's what they don't tell you, is people have been getting smaller and smaller and smaller for a very, very, very long time. So if you go in Egypt, in the Valley of the Kings, and you look there, you still have some of the people from ancient times that are 60 feet tall. You know, that's why the doorways are that tall, because it's built for the gods, but it's not the gods. And then you also have the Nephilim, which are giants too. So you've got both good guys and bad guys, and they're fighting and killing each other, even back then. And so the bad guys won. But now that's turning around, and Earth is getting its freedom. All of it, not just humanity. There's still some of those types out there, both the good ones and the bad ones.
Well, Gene, we're getting on the show. Is there any particular things that you want to talk about in terms of? I mean, there's a heck of a lot of stuff around the so-called British Isles, with portals and energy fields. I mean, if the southwest of Cork and the southwest of England have the same sort of energetic structures, you know, St. Ives and all that sort of place. The Nazis, sorry, I can't say that. But they were there studying very detailed analysis of the energy lines and doing an awful lot more work on the Earth's energy grids. And likewise, Southwest Ireland and Cork and Dingle. Who do you think won that war, or was there a winner, or are they still doing it?
It's hard to say because the history is so distorted. But you know, the winners wrote the history, and in the case of this world, that's usually the bad guys. So I would say the bad ones won. But I saw Josie had her hand up, so you know.
Yeah, look, I think we should maybe sort of try and counter this. I'm so appreciative of your time, Jean, and maybe it would probably be wonderful if you would come back and join us, because I think we could have another 2 or 3 shows just talking about sort of the geography of the UK and Ireland. So talk us through the routes in around sort of. I'll focus on Ireland just because that is my point that I wanted to get started, because generally we kind of get a wee bit forgotten about, you know, over here. So so tell me, what kind of routes do you know about from Ireland? What ports do they use? Miles had said there that Cork Harbour is some big hub, you know, where there seems to be an awful lot that's happening in underneath the water there. And there seems to be like sub bases and so forth. So tell me, what do you know about which ports are used, and where are the routes that are coming through there? You'd mentioned before that there was a route that goes from Cork that travels up towards Killarney, up through Clare to Galway, heading up to Lough Cara. So that's one route that you've established already. And there's a route that runs from sort of Galway to Dublin. And I was wondering if there's a route that runs sort of Cork west to the likes of sort of Bantry, and also if there's a route from Cork that runs out to the east to Waterford and Wexford, and how are they sort of navigating their way up through the city or through the entire country? Which you know,
you have those tunnels. The main focus I did before was on the DUMBS that are for the deep state. So you have massive amounts of tunnels and connections, both maglev and even submarine tunnels, and then underground highways and roadways, and then even smaller ones too. So like I said, it goes back to the Romans, which goes back to the Atlanteans, which goes back. I mean, it just goes and goes and goes. But the main dumps that the deep state had in Ireland are first in Mayo County, which was in an entrance from the feeder to the Alley River on the foothills of the Pottery Mountains, about 12 miles east of Westport while heading to Lake Cara. And that facility is over 1,000 years old. It shows you what I mean about how old this stuff is. And then the next one was Station Island, and that's relatively new, but that's high-level demonic stuff, and that was satanic ritual and ninth circle sacrifice area underneath there. And so if you look at that from above, you have a stylized in the landscaping, the all-seeing eye, and the eye of Horus. So they love their symbology. They seem to always have to do that. And then you have the part of the Orion star system delineated out in the buildings of that Station Island. And then those are the only main systems of DUMBS that the deep state had in Ireland, actual DUMBS. And then those are tied directly to Scotland, like I was saying. You have Balmoral Castle, which is a ritual sacrifice area with a large tunnel that goes to Windsor Castle. And then you had, in Wales, you have Brecon Beacons Dome. And this is, it's so ancient they don't even know what civilization built it. But it's an elite group called the Group 5-8 that ran that dome. And it was
the Brecon Beacons, very, very nasty stuff there.
Yeah, that was formed by Margaret Thatcher, very, very nasty, in the 1980s. At the sites of crashed ET craft, an ET craft they brought down in Britain in there. And even though the 5-8 group was formed by Margaret Thatcher, it's a UN group now. And so the UN Group 5-8 they have an identity card with a hologram, even in the 80s on it. Very clandestine. It has a secret motorway that goes into it. And there are photos that show that 16, 20-year-old girls have been mutilated, genitals removed, eyeballs removed, and dumped on the side of roads, skin missing, just to cast it on the aliens. It's not the aliens, it's the deep state. So that's how they do it. You know, all these abductions and stuff, it's deep state. If you look at Stephen Greer, he talks about that. So it's a
also, likewise, the north of Scotland near John O'Groats, there's actually a case broken there of an isolated house there that received girls on the railway lines. You used about 4 different stations on that railway line. It's all in the newspapers up there now.
Yeah, and then also in Scotland you have St. Bride's Bay, which is a submarine entrance, and so that location is in the Welsh Triangle, as they call it, and that's heavily alien, non-terrestrial. And it's near the entrance is at Stack Rocks at St. Bride's Bay, and so the submarines go in at Stack Rocks.
I think Peter Paget wrote a book on that, the Welsh Triangle,
yes.
and the MOD banned it. No, they didn't ban it. They simply bought all its copies, but that's now back in release.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I didn't know that. I knew about his book, and there's actually a movie made off his book, too. So, I mean, that's the ones outside of England that are used by the deep state. And for the alliance, the deep state for the UK, there's about 24 so that I know of. So you have Bentwaters, Rendlesham, in Rendlesham Forest. Peter Paget talked about that. That's base 48.3 workshop. He put that in his workshop disclosure part 2 of September 7, 2015 in his basis project. And it's about...
He got quite a telling off from the Daily Mail on that. He has suffered for that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it's a combination of ETs, drones. They have 3 back-engineered craft there. They use their technology. The ET came in and actually into the base, froze everybody, and took out all the plutonium fuses because they're going to create a nuclear war, World War III. And then they converted all the plutonium to iron, and it dripped down and ran out into the forest. And so it was cleaned up and they cut down some of the trees in the area just to hide it all because they didn't want that area to know. And so that was
there was radiation there. Nick Pope made a reference that there were significant amounts of radiation there, but in typical fashion, in a sentence or two later, he said there were insignificant amounts of radiation there.
Yeah, because the ETs altered it. So it was the British's largest nuclear arsenal deterrent in that one, and it's gone now. It was just, mutually assured destruction, so to speak, but they're going to start mutually assured destruction. And then there's a set of DUMBS that are interconnected. RFA Bentwaters, Woodridge, Waterbeach, Lakenheath, Skullthorpe, and Neath. So,
what about the Lake District, northwest England, into Carlingford Lough in Ireland? Carlingford Lough is between the border.
Well, they're all, like I said, in the UK, everything's interconnected. Everything's connected. And so Waterbeach they had chimeras that are venom fighters. And then, of course, we know about Rendlesham. We just went through that. And then the Bentwaters looks abandoned, but it's not. And that's because there's a Zeta Reticuli grace base underneath it. And it was being used for mark alternate child sacrifice, achrome harvesting, and harvesting of organs before the Alliance took it over. And so that's now no longer the case, of course. Then there's Berkshire Newbury, which is in Berkshire RF near Greenham Common. And that's for anti-gravity back engineered craft and storage. It's headquarters for Project Mannequin. It's an MI6 mind control program and genetic manipulation, A1 hybrid programs, and advanced anuclear research, which is converting nuclear energy directly into electromagnetic energy.
Just on a side note there, both Greenham Common and Bentwaters are available to make science fiction movies like Star Wars, if you want.
Oh, yes. Yes, that's because that's already there. So they can actually just film what's already there. And then you have, of course, we talked about Peasemore in Berkshire, under the town of Peasemore, and that's the AL499 base. And it's a massive base. This is the biggest one in the UK. It is that entire area is underneath there. And so besides housing nuclear weapons and missiles, it was used for cloning, Mark Ultra, conditioning, mind control to create super soldiers, and in genetic enhancement, along with cyborg increase in placement, and it was also tied to the NSA and housed gray facilities and did many genetic crossbreeding, bipedal wolf type, for example, from mixing with Canis Empire beings from Sirius. That feed off fear and hatred, and along with chimeras with humans that do that. And so that was that one. That's the largest one in the entire UK. And then you have Berkshire in RAF Welford, and the next one.
That's right beside it. It's Air Force Base. There's a road off I think the M4. That goes nowhere. It just happens to be a full road junction, but there's nothing happening here, but it's not available to the public.
Yeah, it's like, there's a place where I grew up here, and there's a four-way highway out to this little dinky thing. I'm like, what do you need a four-way highway out in the middle of nowhere for? It's kind of obvious. I was like, oh my word, talk about ridiculous sometimes, obvious. Then the next one is Berkshire RAF Welford. Like I said, then there's Buckingham Palace itself, and it has large facilities.
A full refurb. That happened a couple of years ago during the so-called emergency, and I asked some of the workers there, and we had a bit of a conversation and nodding of heads with everybody, not saying anything, but saying a lot.
Yep. And of course, Buckingham has large tunnels that go to Whitehall and the Parliament. And then that's also, we talked about Zenner, and that connects to Montauk through the Mendenhall stones. It creates portals to do that. And that's where we talked about Alice Crowley, and he had a quantum grid line going to Montauk that they would use to connect.
Just for anybody who wants to know, there are tours of that region by Bob Osborne. If he will take you up there, and also the NZIS lair. There's another house within sight of what Alistair Crowley. We can see the thing, and all those buildings are within fairly easy walking. Of course, they've got normal people living in there, except for the one with Alistair Crowley. The farmers won't allow access to that. In fact, there's a truck there that drove there and has never been able to drive away, so it's sitting there rotting.
Oh my goodness! And then, of course, you have in Cornwall, St. Ives. We talked about that, and it has the largest sea gate in the UK. It's for the world subsystem. It goes into the world subsystem. So it's on the shore of that seaside town of St. Ives. And they abduct people there regularly and implant them and then return them. They don't know anything about it. And that's according to James Caswell, who's, I said before, MI6N.
Published a new book called Escape from Tartarian.
Mm-hmm. And it actually connects with DUMBS directly in the lakes in Peru and lakes in Malaysia and under Penang Island. And he was taken from that dome in St. Ives straight to Penang Island. So it shows you. And then that was also connected to Alistair Crowley's conjurings and stuff with children and missing children and Zenner and all of that, and tied to non-terrestrial stuff. So, and the Devon police actually in Cornwall had reports of missing children in that area as well. And like you said, D.H. Lawrence stayed at a small cottage in Zenner, and he heard explosions while he was there coming from deep underground. And then we talked about Carn Cottage, which is part of the wild, rugged landscape of the Zenner Hill area for over 200 years. It's an ancient burial area. So, of course, that's going to attract stuff. And Crowley was doing all his conjuring. That's where he had his main area, where he was doing stuff. And so there's a lot of Satanism and Greys and Reptilians connection to that area as well.
I think he was communicating with Jack Parsons
yes.
in the States at the time.
Yes. And we talked about the Clouds House. We've gone through that one. And all about what's in there. And our RAF Lakenheath, we talked about that in Suffolk. And that's a Monsoon 1 facility. That's 70 miles northwest of London, about 25 miles from Cambridge. It's now completely run by the U.S. Air Force. It's a White Hats, actually the Space Force now. And it's now working with Sandia Labs, which is also taken by the Alliance. And then Liverpool has miles of tunnels under it. I mean, and a lot of that was child sacrifice and torture and acrum harvesting and satanic rituals, like under the Metropolitan Cathedral. There's a lot of Masonic symbology in that, and in the Anglican Cathedral in that area. And the Metropolitan Cathedral is, if you know your symbology, is the most satanic looking thing you've ever seen as far as a church. And then in London, you had a CLC-1 base under Westminster in the Parliament, under the Parliament, and that had sacrifice and demonics going on. And an intricate maze of tunnels under the entire city that connected everything, like the new Victoria Tube Line to the Intercontinental Hotel on Park Lane, to Buckingham Palace, to Hyde Park Station, Hyde Park Tube Station. Maglev connects to Maglev's with tunnels and to the residences and offices of 10 Downing Street, to the offices of the Prime Minister, to the office of the Chancellor, of the Executive. And a lot of this was actually built by George Downing himself, under King Charles II, as he was a spy for Oliver Cromwell. And so he actually built a lot of that way, way, way back then. And so that's all actually, a lot of that's backed up by James Casbolt as well. And that also has a Stargate to a planet in the Sirius system. James Casbolt said he was actually taken through that to the Sirius system, to a planet in Sirius. He said it was Sirius B, and they had 7 pentagons in one area. And that our Pentagon in Arlington in the U.S. and Virginia is an exact replicate of those ancient pentagons on Sirius. So that's, he said, where those pentagons, the U.S. got that idea, is from that one. And then Manchester, and that's has tunnels to Wales and Ireland from that DUMB in Manchester. And there's many of the tunnels that go, for example, most of your hospitals, the Royal Infirmary, that has a facility under it for Mark Ultra and harvesting and all that. And then you have Menwith Hill, and that's now a Space Force facility, NSA originally, but it's now a space base. And you have Oxfordshire, that's Harwell Laboratories, and that deals in quantum research and AI for medical and space applications. Now, it was, converted from what the deep state had it. Then you have Shrivenham, you talked about that before, the Watchfield Military Science College Defense Academy Institute, and that has tunnels and entrances under it that go to from Shrivenham to between Shrivenham and Watchfield, and the southwest corner of Oxfordshire in the Vale of the White Horse, and that goes to Staffordshire and Porton Downs. And we talked about Porton Downs already too. And so that's in the last stages of being cleaned out. And that's a defense science and technology laboratory there, is what that was. And it has 6 levels in it. So they were operating they were doing hybridization, in other words, chimeras, Project Mannequin, Super Soldiers, Mark Ultra program, and for decades research chemical and all kinds of other research on human beings. It's probably one of the longest running programs there anywhere on Earth. And so it has a deep and dark history. And then that actually is connected to tunnels that go straight to the Strangeway prison dump, because the Strangeway prison has a 100-year history of executions and riots and terrible stuff going on. And so that most prisons have tunnels and DUMBS under them, but Strangeways is one of the most dark ones on Earth. And then that's, of course, all of this is interconnected. Then you have in Westminster, the UK Parliament, which has a large underground area for rituals, of course, tunnels to Buckingham Palace, Whitehall, and Windsor Castle. And it had a massive area, massive area of gold storage and ancient artifacts. And then you have Whitehall itself. And so in Whitehall, you have the systems that go to Buckingham Palace. This is the hub. So the tunnels all hub from Whitehall, and they go to Buckingham and Windsor Castle, Buckingham Palace, Windsor Castle, Parliament, Balmoral Castle in Scotland. And then lastly, we already talked about Wiltshire, Corsham, and the massive computer that kept all of the secrets. It was called the CCC. It was like the center hub for all of the blackmail on everybody on Earth, and it was tied to the one in Israel. And so that's when Israel was hit by Iran, the Golden Dome got a hold of that, and that's what it's blackmailing everybody with. And so it's sometimes referred as Tunnel Quarry, but because it has an underground stone quarry that was converted to an ammunition dump during World War II. And we already talked about Rudloe Manor. It's under the Royal Air Force Base, or RFA box, just outside of Bath in southern England. And that's, the area for the royal family, for continuity of government to go to. It's like the British Area 51, where they do back engineering of down non-terrestrial craft, alien autopsies, interrogations of aliens. And for those that think aliens are bad, if they travel billions of years and we keep killing them and interrogating them and bringing down their craft and they haven't done anything, they haven't hurt us, they've actually saved our hides several times from nuking ourselves, they're not bad. And they're very patient and very compassionate. So back to Rudloe, it's now purposely kept looking like it's a derelict, and some of the property was sold off for £1.5 million to maintain the image, some of the tunnels and other stuff, but it's still active. And that, as I said, was used as the hub for the organization for the World War II. And then Windsor Castle, we talked about that. I talked about that already. That had a large underground area for ritual sacrifice, tunnels to Buckingham, Whitehall, Parliament, Balmoral Castle. It has a small tunnel that goes under, this is the one that goes under Hadrian's Wall. It goes from Windsor Castle, and then it goes to the catacombs in Paris. So the tunnels go under the channel, under Hadrian's Wall, and then to the catacombs under Paris. And then lastly, for the UK is York, RFA Flyingdales. And that's part of the Royal Air Force early warning system, but it had a small dome underground for rituals and tunnels to all the aforementioned areas, including the tunnel that goes under Hadrian's Wall. So that's it for the UK in entirety.
Just on that, thank you very much, Jean. That's very, very comprehensive. There was an area that Miles and I were sort of half mentioning there. It's called the Devil's Thumb up at Londonderry. It's the Clintons call it their home from home, if you know what I mean. So
of course they do.
Oh, needless to say, was it whenever Hillary last visited, she went to visit a school, and lo and behold, there was like a dozen sheep were skinned and then killed, skinned first and then killed in the fields adjacent to the school the night before that she arrived. You know, I mean, it's just like, you know, I just. Where do you take the likes of that? But do you know anything about that particular area? There's sort of UFO, sightings there, sort of things that are sort of going underwater. But there's a number of different associations in that particular area. There's a DUMB, and there's a old US Army base, and there's a military. It was at a UK military base there in McGilligan, and also an old prison there. So there's lots happening there. Do you have any information on that particular area?
That one I don't have anything on, no.
Okay. There's also there was the landing place of the Anunnaki in the Leitrim, Sligo area. It's called the Mountain of Iron. Now, apparently Himmler had sent, this is in around sort of wartime, Himmler had sent some of his men to come and recover some core samples of the iron from Iron Mountain, and that this allegedly was found in Hitler's vault. Have you heard anything about that?
Yeah, Hitler was sending people all over the world to find anything.
Yeah.
They didn't really find anything from there. Where
Okay.
they found stuff was Tibet. That's the main area with the green men, as they call them in Tibet, that they got technology and some other things. And then, of course, they got a few things from the Middle Eastern areas. But the Iron Mountain, all they got is iron.
Yeah. Well, just a small point. Do you know anything about any DUMBS in Waterford? I was just posing a question with a friend there. We were talking about the Stanley Kubrick film Barry Lyndon that was recorded in Waterford in the south of Ireland, and it was in amongst all of the mind-bending films that Stanley Kubrick was doing, filmed with the NASA cameras and sort of going to the moon and all of this kind of stuff. And then all of a sudden he's sitting in some house in Waterford City doing an entire film. And we're sort of saying there's something more to this, because just like, why would he do this sort of very sedate kind of film in amongst all of these mind-bending, expose, sort of big revealed films that he has sort of very deeply coded, and yet there's this very sort of sedate film in the mix. Do you know anything about Waterford or anything about that Barry Lyndon film? Is there any particular reason why he was recording in Waterford?
No, I don't know about that one either. But I'm back onto Iron Mountain. I do have to say that they did remove, beside iron, they removed gold. And there was ancient iron bronze works in the Iron Mountain area from the Celts. And so they found some beautiful jewelry, bronze jewelry with some unique gems in it and things like that that they, of course, still stole, and they've never been seen again. But unfortunately, because they're ancient and very old and very beautiful,
Yeah.
and unique, can't be found anywhere else on Earth. So they're gone. Who knows where? Probably off-world or base 2-in-1, squirreled away there.
A lot of those bronze works were associated with the little people because they were doing the underground mining sort of with these little tiny tunnels. In fact, that place that you mentioned there, Ross Castle, has all of these little miniature tunnels where it's associated with the ferry, but also the little people down there. And there's also a portal. They would be mining associated with the beakers, the beaker people. They were mining all of these metals. This was sort of spiritual significance associated with the metals that were found underground.
Yeah. So, yeah, a lot of that's all over the British Isles. You have very high activity with the little people. In fact, from my understanding, excuse me, part of the battle of King Arthur, with the battle between them and the Picts, with the what's his name? Merlin.
Mm-hmm.
Merlin had the little people on his side, and that's why King Arthur wound up kind of not winning that one.
Well, there's some stories. There's a lady, Dr. Martinez, and she wrote a book about the little people. She's also connected with a religion called the Osabes, but she'd stated that the little people were likely the builders helped build the pyramids, and then she links that through to bas relief carvings, where in with the pharaohs there are not children but little people, that they seem to be sort of kind of knowing what was going on, and that they were actually sort of a lot of the brains behind that particular outfit.
Well, actually, you did have a, so to speak, princess from Egypt that went to the Isles.
Yeah, well, there's
specifically Scotland. Her name was Scotta.
Yeah, Scotia. Yeah, absolutely, Scotia.
She changed her name. Her original name was Meritidin, and she was the daughter of Akhenaten.
That's correct. That's correct. Yeah. Funny, that line that you were talking about for the St. Michael's and so forth off the west coast of Ireland, and Killarney and from Tara, that line travels through her the place where she's allegedly to have died. So that's meant to be sort of the inauguration line. That's one of the critical points on it. So she wasn't a particularly nice creature, So but she was said to be sort of the mother of the Freemasonry, and she went after, she was fighting the Tuatha De Danann, sort of the fairy, the she, or the people of the Sid Mounds, and but she wouldn't have been well liked, sort of the Book of Invasions is where her sons came and sort of invaded Ireland, so but she wouldn't and so anyway, she sort of pretty much sort of massacred the Tuatha De. So she wasn't a particularly nice person, but yeah, there is a big connection. But also there was Pharaoh King Menes. In fact, there's a lot of sort of pharaonic artifacts in around sort of Ireland still, and King Menes and King Bez, pre-dynasty and Egyptian monarchs that had come to Ireland, and there's still artifacts that remain sort of from their visit here. So which is kind of interesting. Bez, he's a dwarf. The little people, interestingly, the little people and the likes of dragons and Anunnaki commemorated in the high crosses and in early Christianity in the whole of the Ireland, like in some of the Clonmacnoise cathedrals, and there's carvings of dragons sort of in there as well as on the high crosses, but it was the great the great advocates of early, I suppose, Coptic and Egyptian Christianity that first came to Ireland. They were meant to have taught St. Patrick, were said to have been little people. So it's it's sort of piecing the whole thing together. What it is, it's a fairly complex kind of a story, but very different to what we would have heard.
Absolutely.
It's been an absolute delight to have you with us, Jean, and hopefully we can sort of catch up again. And this has been an absolute treat for myself and Miles. So, Miles, do you want to say some words here?
I think it's really great.
Well, I'll
it's
speak on Miles's behalf. So
it's good. It's good. Sorry, you can't hear me. Sorry, I was did the wrong knob. Thank you very much, Jean. It's been a big honor, and it's great to hear from you, and to get some more information about these islands off the coast of Europe. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Look, we'll wrap this up. An absolute pleasure. And just, do you know what? We'll just say a few last words about James Rink, because I know that Jean, you and James were good friends, and just that we all miss him, and we're all very shocked about what happened to James in the last week.
Yeah. So many good people have gone already. I mean, I started out with, mostly one of the persons primarily responsible for getting me out there was Kirsten Wong, Duggan. Yeah, and she's gone. And now James Rink. And, I've had some other people closer to me that, help me with things and were in communications with me recently that are gone as well. So it's just the times we're in, and plus with the shedding and that stuff combined in there, it's a lot of people are leaving now. It's that time.
He was in a hell of a state. I was quite shocked to see him when we co-promoted his recent conference.
He looked, the last thing I saw that he was doing, he looked pretty drawn. And like,
I think he was poisoned. And I think people who did it.
I don't know, but, he didn't look good then.
He looked horrendous. I couldn't believe it. Shocked. Yep. It's only about a week ago now.
But a really good man, real kind person. And so, world will be missing his presence. So it was an honor to know him and to be able to be on his platform a couple times. So thank you, James, and we'll see you out there as I go, and leave this place. Thank you, sir.
I'd say he's helping us from the other side now, as is Kirsten. So but no, thank you very much, Jean. I really appreciate it. It's been an absolute pleasure, and there's nobody else that could provide this kind of information. And like what Miles said about that, he had heard one of your tip-offs many years ago, and he'd gone out to check it out, and he was able to validate everything. There was another one of the DUMBS that you would talk about in Ireland quite a lot, and I had I was asked to go and take a look, sort of, and I can verify that what you're saying is accurate. So thank you very much for bringing the information to us. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. See you next time.
Thank you. Bye-bye.